Welcome viewers to Talk for Pak for this week. We are fortunate again to have Senator Javed Jabbar with us. And today we are hoping to have the discussion to a wider South Asian lens and then talk about both intra-national relationships and what is happening within countries and what each country can learn from each other. So if we may jump right in, Javed Saab, if we may, one of the first things one wants to talk about is, could you give us a quick update on the state of South Asia, how we are doing, because India has gone through some very major changes. And then there are parallels we see, at least some of us discuss the fact that India is going through a very similar nationalistic arc that we have in Pakistan, either during or after General Zia's time. And, you know, the discussion becomes that you have engaged both with General Zia's regime and almost every regime since. You have worked on the track to diplomacy between those countries. And we'll come back to that in a minute and discuss what the state of that discussion is. But let's start with a general high-level overview of what's happening in South Asia.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Let me straight away clarify that I did not ever work with General Zia. In fact, I was in that very small opposition group in the Senate during his tenure from March 1985 to August 1988 when he died in that air crash. I remained throughout in opposition to General Zia. However, I have worked with General Musharraf. Looking at South Asia as a region, we need to begin by acknowledging that in terms of interstate cooperation, as reflected in trade and in free travel and tourism, relatively, South Asia is probably the most undeveloped, backward region on the planet today. Most other regions, except perhaps the Organization of African Unity, which had difficulty because of the sheer size of the continent. Here we have no excuse to offer because the number of states is barely 10. It is not even 10, it is less than 10. And the fact is that for a body that held its first meeting back in 1986-85 when President Ziaur Rahman of Bangladesh proposed the first meeting of SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. The potential that SAARC offers has been utilized or achieved only fractionally. And again, at this stage in 2019, I am not speaking as a parochial Pakistani when I say that the onus for this, the responsibility for not taking SAARC forward, rests wholly and squarely with India. Not only because it is the largest country in SAARC, but for the fact that for the past 4 years and more, India has prevented the convening of the summit of SAARC, which is supposed to be held once a year, from being held in Pakistan. The location of the summit is rotated between the member states, and this was Pakistan's opportunity to host it. By bringing in this absolutely unjustified, bloated, exaggerated claim and linkage between the cessation of terrorism and the holding of the summit, India has injected into SAARC a terrible diversionary direction, which it will be difficult to recover, but it can still be done. During the period when SAARC has been active, it has been marked by very promising progress in concluding the SAARC preferential trade agreement, in identifying hundreds and thousands of items that can and should be freely traded, It has identified prospects for exchanges in academia, education, scientific research, most importantly in climate change, because climate change knows no borders, and there is no question of one country remaining unaffected by the adverse impact of climate change. So, SAARC has helped facilitate dialogue and illustrated the enormous potential that lies before us. But the condition for SAARC to proceed must be based on regular dialogue. And the tragedy is that this regular dialogue has been stalled both at the head of state level, head of state or head of government level, and at the ministerial level, because of the obdurate policy that India has introduced into SAARC. Now, let me conclude this part of my answer by saying that in any region where one member of a regional organization is disproportionately larger than all the other members, this asymmetry is bound to cause problems. Which brings to mind a memorable observation made by President Suharto of Indonesia, regarding ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And Tan Sri Shafi Ghazali, who served as Foreign Minister of Malaysia, once shared this little gem with me, for which I was very deeply touched. He said, "This problem of asymmetry also faced us in ASEAN, because Indonesia is by far the huge predominant country there, and Singapore is a minuscule country compared in population terms to Indonesia." So he said, how did we go about it? He said, President Suharto said something very visionary. He said, in a bamboo grove, if one bamboo is taller than all the other bamboo, that taller bamboo has to bend a little, has to show the capacity for magnanimity and to be able to harmonize with all the others in that bamboo grove. And he said the secret of ASEAN's comparative success compared to SAARC is the fact that Indonesia agreed to work non-hegemonistically and non-dominantly with the other smaller countries. So one hopes that the Indian state also does the same.
So, sir, coming to that, actually the question that rises in my mind is that Pakistan itself is not exactly a small country. I mean, take it out of India's shadow, and it is still one of the top, I think the 5th or 6th largest nation. How has that interaction happened with the smaller countries and all of that? But I want to bring in our co-host, Mr. Misbah Azam here. I know he has some things he wants to tease out on these issues. Misbah Sahab?
Yeah, Senator Saab, you did mention about the SAARC and the failure of the SAARC, and now then these countries are, for the regional cooperation, they are coming up with another thing, BIMSTEC, which is SAARC minus Pakistan virtually. I mean, of course, there are some addition to all the countries which are part of the Bay of Bengal. Now, how you see that? There is a very interesting article about it, that how the failures of SAARC can be recovered using the BIMSTEC, but still there is some sort of competition. And in such a big region, how it is possible that BIMSTEC, which is being used by Prime Minister Modi just not to invite, so that they don't have to invite Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, how that BIMSTEC will be taking over, and how anybody can imagine that countries like Pakistan, so big, a nuclear power, you can keep it out from the things, or it is going to be some success over the time.
Thank you. Pakistan does not have to depend on the goodwill of dear Mr. Modi for its importance to be recognized. And BIMSTEC cannot be and is not a substitute for SAARC. Pakistan welcomes any regional cooperation initiative, and does not feel in any way excluded. Look at how Pakistan relates to the countries of Central Asia or with West Asia through organizations like ECO, Economic Coordination Organization, which brings together Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan. How we look at SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which brings together China, India, and large number of Central Asian states. So, the development of BIMSTEC is very good for that part of the world's region. SAARC has a specificity to the way we describe South Asia. We even expanded the concept of South Asia to include Afghanistan. And therefore, we do not feel in any way that by not being part of BIMSTEC, the significance of Pakistan is in any way reduced. It remains constant. And Pakistan has very good relations with all other SAARC countries, even Afghanistan. Despite the continuous tension, Afghanistan depends substantially on Pakistan's goodwill and transit trade, which is permitted by Pakistan, even at the expense of Pakistan's own economy. The key thing now for SAARC would probably be connectivity in trade. India is very anxious to obtain access to Central Asia and Afghanistan through Pakistan's land route. We would be willing to consider that, provided India also offers reciprocal rights to Pakistan to trade with Nepal, to trade with Bangladesh across Indian territory. And if safeguards are enforced, this connectivity could open up great potential for trans-Asian corridors of trade and telecommunication and travel, free travel. I mean, the Kartarpur, for example, corridor is one small reflection of the potential that exists. So, the need is to revive SAARC. All other countries have been held hostage because India is not willing to go forward with the summit process.
So, sir, that brings us to the other discussion we've been wanting to have with you, which is to give us an update on Track 2 diplomacy. In fact, we'd like to start with you explaining to our audience what exactly is Track 2 diplomacy, what role it plays in the relations between countries. Because if there was ever a couple of countries that needed alternative ways of engaging, it is India and Pakistan. As you just laid out, this affects the whole region and the global situation as well.
You see, Track 1 refers to the normal, conventional, diplomatic relationship between any two countries. The maintenance of embassies, the contact between the two foreign offices, and the conduct of interstate relations through trade and so on. That is Track 1. However, there is also a variety of ways in which Track 2 can be carried on. One of these is the political Track 2 dialogue, which means that if there are issues and problems that have not been resolved between any two states, they agree on a system of non-official dialogue, which is conducted regularly and which is conducted confidentially, preferably without disclosing the content to the media, because some initiatives have to be developed into full policy proposals. And even before they are developed into full policy proposals, if concepts are aired prematurely, then they can be killed or sabotaged or aborted even before they have been brought to a crystallized state. However, there is also a public version of Track 2, which is, say, the people-to-people dialogue. But even the people-to-people dialogue can only take place if the two states agree to issue visas. There is this misconception that the people-to-people dialogue is very nice, it's holy, it's friendly, and it is the evil, dark, villainous governments and states that don't want people-to-people contact. No people-to-people contact is possible unless states are willing to issue visas for travel, unless they allow interaction. Look at the attitude of Pakistan. We allow the import of Indian films, Indian songs until the February 2019 incident. Pakistan has always been very open to this. we have welcomed that even while we maintain our position on Kashmir and we bitterly criticize the repressive actions of being taken in Indian-occupied Kashmir. So track 2 can have a public version, it can have a quiet, confidential, or even ultimately secret version. The secret version of track 2 is called back-channel dialogue. Now, back-channel normally means one person, a single person, chosen by the respective heads of state or government, who meet together and take up ideas which have been generated by track 2 or track 1 and discuss in complete secrecy how the two sides can move closer towards the common position on a given policy issue. So there are at least 3 levels. One, publicly known track 2, one publicly unknown track 2, and one the secret back channel process. So all these three have been used between India and Pakistan at various times. Yeah.
So how is that going? I mean, we, especially, I'll tell you as an expat or as a Pakistani American, we also have that problem of, for example, the Indian government treating, American-born Pakistani Americans with visa issues and those problems. So for the common man, what has been going on? What's the update? Is there any improvement in that general area?
The Indian government probably suffers from the misconception that by making it difficult for Pakistani Americans to travel to India with visas, it will bring to bear pressure on the government of Pakistan to change some of the policies that India thinks are not friendly to India. This is a grave misconception. Regrettably, Pakistani Americans, as nice and noble as you are, for example, will have to bear the price for India's short-sightedness on this issue. Never will the government of Pakistan change its policy only because of India's coercive pressure on issuing visas. This is a short-sighted, blinkered policy. In contrast, look at the Pakistan position. In recent weeks, we have greatly liberalized our policy about issuing visas, including visas to Indians, which of course will be subject to greater scrutiny. But we are much more open to promoting travel, official travel and unofficial travel, as evident in our attitude to welcoming Sikh pilgrims to Pakistan. We do not find reciprocity coming forth from India. So there's great work to be done there, not with us.
I think Misbah Azam had a follow-up.
Yeah, I have one short follow-up question. I don't know after that Sabahat will have anything, but this would be my last follow-up question regarding the trade between India and Pakistan. And India did give Pakistan the most favorable nation status for some time, but Pakistan is the one was reluctant. And how you see it, if Pakistan will also allow the Afghan transit, Indian transit to Afghanistan, Central Asia through Pakistan, don't you, how you see it that the Indian corporate would have a stakes in Pakistan, How you see it, why Pakistan was so reluctant in doing that? And our friend, just one more, I apologize to interrupt you, Sandra sir. Our friend Dr. Moeed Yusuf made one comment very interesting that virtually the Chabahar port, we created that for them because we created a situation where they went to the Chabahar thing. How you see all that, sir?
I respectfully disagree with both contentions. Chabahar is not the result of Pakistan-India tension or Pakistan-Afghanistan tensions. Chabahar has its own validity and Iran is perfectly justified in developing the port. We do not see this as a threat to Gwadar. Gwadar has enormous capacity unrivaled by Chabahar. Coming to the India-Pakistan trade issue, let me clarify that the use of this term most favored nation is misleading because when China and America moved towards rapprochement, there was strong opposition in the US Congress to giving China most favored nation status. So an alternative formulation was found by which exactly the same terms were afforded to China and vice versa without using the term most favored nation. Now, a similar situation applies in Pakistan and India. As of today, to the best of my knowledge, the trade between Pakistan and India is heavily in favor of India, not Pakistan. To the best of my knowledge, India exports about $1.4 billion to $1.5 billion worth of goods to Pakistan each year. Pakistan is able to export only about $400 million. Now, the reason why Pakistan cannot increase its exports to India is not because of anything lacking in Pakistan. It is the non-tariff measures that India applies to goods coming in from Pakistan. For example, till some time ago, cement, which was a very quality product from Pakistan in demand in India, was shipped across the border from Wagah to Amritsar. The quality control examination of that cement would not be done in or close to Amritsar. It would be done in laboratories about 1,000 miles away, while the shipment would have to wait, expensive time and costs going up for it to be cleared for onward sale and dispatch. That is a classic example of a non-tariff measure. Now, India needs to improve this policy so that Pakistan can increase its exports to India. But as of today, even with the tension in February and March, Pakistan has not cut down on imports from India, which cannot be said the other way around. Impediments have been found in India against Pakistani exports. So, the onus, unfortunately, sits with the country that is currently exporting 3/4 of bilateral trade, which is in India's favor.
So, sir, to wind up, how do you see us moving forward? We've had this. Where do you see South Asia going? As you pointed out, generally in the region, the India-Pakistan tension is a major sticking point for everybody. So, do you see us making any progress now that we are past the Indian election?
You see, there are two options that can occur, that can happen. Number one, on the official level, SAARC can facilitate dialogue and bilateral initiatives. On the other, there is an initiative that I had proposed in the early 1990s, in connection with which I met a wide cross-section of India's leaders, including Mr. Vajpayee and several other Congress leaders, Mr. Narasimha Rao, all of whom endorsed the proposal which I had presented, which is to hold a South Asian political leaders conference, not a conference of those in power, but a conference of those both in opposition and in power. One version of this was attempted by Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto in 1994, when she, earlier, 1991-92, when she invited only the opposition parties of South Asia to come to Karachi for a conference. In my view, that was a very limited vision. It was a good vision. Hasina Wajid came and people from India also came. But the idea is that one must develop a bipartisan consensus in India, in Pakistan, and in other countries on the need to create a new South Asia based on mutual respect and trust and enormous potential in trade. And it can be done if the political leaders get together every year and conduct dialogue, learn to listen to each other. I had even called it a non-legislative South Asian parliament. And an op-ed piece I had written about this appeared in the news in those days in 1992. It was widely endorsed. And I hope that, forget my idea, anyone else should take up that initiative or improve on that initiative and bring political leaders together to build trust and dialogue.
So on that hopeful note, that's at least one suggestion that we can take forward. I think we'll wind up the show. Misbah Saab, thank you. Javed Saab, thank you very much for being so generous with your time, despite the time zone issues and your busyness.
Pleasure, Sabahat Saab. Thank you for your questions and your invitation.
We will talk again. Audience, we would love to hear back from you. And those of you who haven't yet talked to us, screamed at us, or praised us, it would be good to hear from everybody. We do read the comments, and I know Javed Saab can also be reached on his websites that we discussed last time. I believe your book and website are...
My website may not give my correct email address. This is the irony. The correct email address is javedjabbar.2@gmail.com.
You heard it here, folks? That is perfect. And
any polite comments are welcome.
Polite comments, even if they disagree with you. Anyway, you heard that, audience, and I can always be reached on the various platforms at iFaqeer. Misbah Azam Saab is at Misbah Azam MD. And please follow us on Facebook and YouTube at Talk for Pak. Thank you. See you next time.